In this 7-minute film, which was in the Rhode Island Natural History, Rhode Island Nature Video Festival last weekend, um, is there, and it's got the highlights and the bloopers and everything. And also, if you go to Natural History Survey, and you can see all of the movies that were in the Nature Video Fest, and vote for your favorite. I'll just mention Ospreys if you're voting. Third, we have, again, from the comfort of your home, you can buy the book Pettaquamscutt Estuary, Past, Present, and Future. It's available through the Narrow River website, $40 for non-members, $30 for members, and you can find everything you want to know about the Narrow River and the watershed. And that's thanks to, it was compiled and edited, and much of it written by our board member, Barry Devine. And last but not least, it's early, we're not planning, but because of the pandemic, we already know we're not going to be having our road race in May and our swim in June. Looks like we will have a version of the Pettaquamscutt paddle in July that's socially distant. And also we'll be having our virtual event, and this year will be 51 minutes of activity for 51 years of NRPA, because this is our 51st year. We're looking forward to the next 50. So just check out our website, narrowriver.org, for all this information. Thanks, David.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. And now Heather Kisilywicz, who's the new executive director of the South County Museum. What's going on at the museum? Well,
we're looking for signs of spring, and it seems as though we're already seeing them. Please come join us for our Family Day, which will be April 3rd, where we're going to celebrate those signs of spring and get everyone outside safely, even if COVID's still sticking around, which I think it will. So we're going to have an egg hunt. You'll get to see our newborn Rhode Island red chickens and a lot of other things that will be very, very fun, including how about planting the three sisters with us. And each little person that will do that will get the chance to paint their own plant marker with artist Cheryl, who's going to be giving the opportunity for each little person to mark their territory and their plant, which includes, of course, beans, squash, and corn. So we're very excited about that. We also will be shearing the sheep on the farm, and that will be on the 24th of April at 11 o'clock. Believe it or not, it doesn't take long to shear 3 sheep, and that's not easy to say, but it's super easy to do. Those are just some of the things, but the most important is we really hope that you will join us when we open the Metz exhibit hall with our newest exhibit on commercial fishing this May.
thank you, Heather.
Mm-hmm.
Now we want to hear from the library. I think that Marilyn Sherman will tell us what's going on.
Well, one of the things going on right now is that apparently I can't share slides. So you should be looking at a picture of the library, but do not. So I just wanted to mention one thing. We are extending our hours, or we have extended our hours, and we are now open Monday through Thursday from 10 to 7, and Friday 10 to 6, and Saturday 10 to 5. So that makes it a little easier for you to make your way in. We have plans going on for spring, wing into spring. So we have not only your upcoming Osprey program, but we have an author who's going to talk about the role of homing pigeons in warfare as messengers. And also we have some bird crafts if anybody wants to take part in those. All right, thank you.
Okay. So information about the 2021 speaker series, past and present, can be accessed on pettaquamscutt.org. You can go to this website to sign up for the March issue. There's a registration button on the screen, and it will direct you to the library website. Or you can go directly to the library and select the registration button on the upper right corner side of the screen. Please keep your devices on mute during the presentation. You can enter your questions in the chat window. At the end of the program, we'll select some questions and put Heather on the spot. Now let's get down to business. And I want to reintroduce today's presenter. That's Heather Kisilywicz. She's the new Executive Director of the South County Museum. Heather earned a Bachelor of Science in Marketing from the University of Rhode Island and is currently pursuing a Master's in Library and Information Sciences. She is in the Genealogical Research Certification Program at Boston University, is on the Board of Directors of the Rhode Island Genealogical Society, and a frequent lecturer around the state on how to evaluate DNA test results for genealogical research. Heather started at the South County Museum in 2020 as an intern researching the genealogy of South County's first fishing families for their new exhibit, Commercial Fishing of Point Judith Then and Now. Today, we will get a preview of that multi-year exhibit, gain some insight into how changes in salinity, available catch, and regulations have contributed to the rise and fall of Point Judith's position as the second largest commercial fishing port on the East Coast. So go to it, Heather.
Thank you very much. We're going to try to go ahead and screen share. So wait just a second. How is that for everybody? Can you see it?
Yep, that's good.
Very good. Okay. So you're going to get the sneak peek of what's coming up in May, but I certainly want to express that this is just a small snippet. We've been working on this exhibit really since 1933. As you're familiar with the South County Museum, we focus on not just agriculture, maritime and textile mills, but the villages that formed around those. And there's a lot of material to cover as far as maritime is concerned. Thank you for joining us today. And it's really important that we establish and continue to talk about the commercial fishing community as part of our maritime history. Hopefully there's a mix of you in the audience who have either benefited from the industry or actively working in it. So first, let's talk about what this talk will not be about. Okay. This is not a fishtail. This is the truth, and hopefully not too many exaggerations. This is not about fun on the open seas, although our commercial fishermen enjoy what they do. In fact, they're passionate about it. We will not be covering recreational or sports fishing. We're going to talk about the most dangerous job in the state of Rhode Island. And again, it's not just a job, it is actually a way of life for the people who have worked in this industry, particularly those who are third or fourth generation in Point Judith. Finally, this isn't going to be limited to the past. History is always evolving, and at the South County Museum, we're trying to tie that to your present and also help the commercial fishing community preserve their past and protect their future. All right, so let's talk about the village. That's really the tale of two villages within the port of Point Judith. I don't know about you, but I grew up being told that the reason why it was called Point Judith is because the captain said, "Point Judith Point, when you see land, let me know." Well, if you check around, there's competing stories on who named it Point Judith and after which Judith. Genealogy at its best, there's the Greenleaf family version that was published in 1854. And they said it was Judith Thatcher on her father's vessel. Evidently, they were having trouble and she helped the crew get to land safely. But then again, Edmund Quincy talked about in the life of Josiah Quincy, who is his father. This was published in 1874, and they attribute it to Judith Hull by her husband, John Hull, who was the captain of the boat. Either way, I do want to say thanks to all the Judiths, we definitely have a beautiful port. But then it comes down to the villages. If you're familiar with Rhode Island and grew up here, we still associate with our villages. There are two sides to every story, and in Point Judith, it is Galilee and Jerusalem. So, who named those? Well, again, there's conflicting stories. In Cindy Follett's book, she talks about Thomas Mann, who is one of the oldest salters in the Point. He was a commercial fisherman, and he attributed to naming this is Galilee, and that's Jerusalem, to a questioning visitor who happened to be standing near him. Well, in Samuel Cottle's book about his grandfather, Cap Clark, he notes, and that book was In Danger at Sea, that it was his grandfather. One word of caution. I think Samuel is extremely proud of his grandfather. And when you read about the fact that he attributes single-handedly to his grandfather that he founded the commercial fishing industry, you might lean closer towards a more objective book like Cindy Follett's. But either way, we continue to look at our villages and even expand to Snug Harbor and even the upper and lower salt ponds. And that's what we'll talk about today. This is a very welcoming community of people. Many people kind of wondered if I would have the opportunity to talk to the commercial fishermen. And believe it or not, they're not only welcoming, but they're very excited about sharing their history and hard work. They are trusting and curious, and so are we, about what they've achieved and what the future might look for them. This is a story of migration of natural resources as well as man-made. This is a beautiful illustration from James Perry in his manuscript on skip, referring to skip stock. Well, in 1979, he published this illustration, and this represents the early 1900s. Notice on the bottom, you're in the salt pond and out towards Griffin's Landing, and then you see Skip's shanty right in the upper corner. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but here's the original location of Skip's shanty. It was also like a salt shack, they referred to. What you're finding here is that they were finding a wonderful salinity of brackish water that often they controlled. They would dig out so that the water in the estuary would come in and meet the saltiness of the ocean, and then it create this wonderful environment that they could dig out, and then naturally it would close back up again. And Prentice Stout's book, A Place of Quiet Waters, is an excellent reference, and I highly recommend it. In fact, I did want to note that we actually lost Prentice Stout, who passed away in the last month. His work is fantastic, and I hope you really do take the chance to pick it up. What happened with the change in salinity, as well as commercialization, you see a migration of people and their businesses out towards the breachway. And skip stock is a perfect example. Another example of the migration are the people who came into our community, and the Dykstras are one of them. If you saw on that map, along with skip stocks were the Dykstras from the upper pond. They actually immigrated from New York here, and the generation before that had come from Holland, where they fished there. The Dykstras would often go from New York to Boston and would stop in the port of refuge, and they discovered that the upper pond was perfect with native oysters. Once the breachway opened up, those native oysters went away. So the Dykstra family, the second and third generation, switched from shell fishing to fin fishing, and again moved closer and closer to the breachway and out to the open sea, because commercial fishermen have always been adaptable. They're able to catch what's there, and of course very seasonal. You'll find in the 1900s that they were able to change their boat based on the gear and what was out there. And through interviews, I quickly learned not to ask what type of fisherman were you, because it depended on what was there. One of the things that we know is the adaptation of both the environment as well as technology have helped commercial fishermen specialize. There were other immigrants that came into the port, some of them very successful. They include on this salt shack map, Gus. Gus right up here was Greek. But funny thing is, there is a note again in Danger at Sea about Gus. There was a George as well, and he was referred to as an Italian sculptor. George the Greek, and there was one or two other immigrants, but they didn't stay in the area. But those who did were able to prosper. And another example of change and migration is as we went from sustenance fishing, we came into the 17th and 18th century with industrialization and the ability to move not only further out in the water from schooner to powerboat, but we're also able to move inland with the fish, thanks to transportation and the train system that was brought into the pier with the support of the commercial fishing industry. We were able to get the catch from Point Judith to new customers. And thankfully, ice harvesting was able to help pack the fish. Skip's dock was known because he was able to build his home, his shanty, but also an ice house. So he was able to pack his fish and get it farther out. Skip really is looked to one of the first successful commercial fishermen, and you can still visit Skip's dock today. As the breachway continued to open and modernize, now you're seeing more specialization. The boats usually will go out farther, and not just for day trips. We're talking about long hauls, more than 4 days, but also they tend to be, again, specialized in their catch, opposed to changing with the season. Ultimately, picture Skip's dock or Skip's shack with just a shell of a building where he was able to bring his catch in, and he met his family and a few trusted friends, and they would shuck the oysters, shuck the quahogs, and prepare the fish, and then get it out to their customers, selling them right there on the dock. Another type of movement is between industries. Oops. The Streeter brothers are a perfect example. This beautiful photo, it's called a silver photograph, was recently restored thanks to the Northeast Document Conservation and 2 generous anonymous donors who helped us restore it to its original beauty. This is a photograph that's hand colored with pencils, and the photo was actually taken at the Narragansett Life Saving Station. We know it as the Coast Guard House today. All 3 brothers were in the life-saving business. That is before we had a Coast Guard. So here they are, dressed in their uniforms, and the Streeter brothers were nicknamed by a neighbor, Hop, Skip, and Jump. So you'll recognize that Skip stayed in the industry of commercial fishing once he retired as a lifesaver. Life-saving was a perfect platform to start commercial fishing because it was extremely dangerous. The life-saving motto was, you have to go out, but you don't have to come back when it comes to helping those who wrecked off the coast of Rhode Island. In this example here, this is a Civil, Military, and Naval Service register or index, and it lists all 3 brothers reporting to 3 different stations along the coast. You had to be strong, brave, and even maybe slightly crazy, I think, to head out in the middle of a hurricane to help the many wrecks that were happening in the beginning of the 1900s. Think sail-powered schooners, and they're traveling from New York up to Boston, and they set up these life-saving stations all along the coast. Hop was George, and he was the Sandy Point keeper. He ended up retiring as a captain from many years of service managing the life-saving stations. Skip, according to James Perry, became an extremely successful commercial fisherman. And then Jump went back to being a farmer. Over and over again, particularly in the late 1800s to the beginning of the 1900s, you see this interplay with people who are farming during the season, jumping out and fishing either for themselves or with commercial fishermen, and then back to the farm. And it was John who decided he was going back to be a farmer. Passed on from generation to generation, people who worked on the ocean knew the dangers, and I think that's one of the reasons why commercial fishermen have multiple generations working successfully. And it's those who enter without experience who often don't succeed. Let's talk about a couple of those families. It's the Westcott family, who's had many generations of commercial fishermen. This is the adorable Wescott brothers, or they look very innocent in this picture. They're the children of Charles Elmer Wescott. And note again, here it is, the ocean in their blood. Charles was a lighthouse keeper in Block Island. And then his three children, Jack, Chet, and Carl, are pictured here. I really adore the little sailor suit and those adorable faces. But keep in mind, these were the three guys who tried to put skunks on Block Island. I don't know if you know, but there are no skunks on Block Island. But these young men tried. What they did is they played a practical joke on their friend, who was also a commercial fisherman. I believe he was out of Block Island. So what they did is they took a couple of skunks, they hit him on his boat, and the goal was, is while he was out on the ocean, that the skunks would be released and then they would jump on the island. Unfortunately, their plan was ruined when they did discover them halfway out back to port, and they promptly disposed of the skunks overboard. And to this day, there are still no skunks in Block Island. Okay, but what other contributions did the Westcott family make? Well, the Scutt King, or Jack Wescott, was known for fighting at the U.S. Supreme Court for his right to follow migratory fish. In September of 1973, he was arrested off the coast of Massachusetts. Why? Well, he was following the fish, and he's known to be quoted to say, "Those fish didn't know what state they were in." He was arrested on the violation of the 1932 Commonwealth of Massachusetts Chapter 36 Act. Well, that basically said that if it was off their coast, they could have it. And since Jack's boat was not registered in Massachusetts, they felt as though that fish was theirs. He fought it. He wasn't going to put up with that, and he won. He was one of many commercial fishermen, not just in Rhode Island, but throughout, who had that claim, and Jack took it all the way to the Supreme Court and really set another example of the strong commercial fishermen that not only were good at catching fish, taking care of their boats, managing their crew, but also making an impact on the nation's fisheries and how they manage them. Okay, let's talk about another family. You're probably familiar with the Champlins. Well, Brownie, or Leon Mayfield, but everyone calls him Brownie, lived 103. And it was probably his occupation. He went from being a farmer to fishing. He's noted to have started fishing as a profession in 1911. But he never lost that farm mentality. He even used the wooden barrels from his farm to store his lobsters on ice as he took them to his customers. Now, this is a time where navigation-wise, he used what's called dead-on reckoning. Just he knew where he was going and he recognized it when he got there. A clock, because they would know from steaming out about how long it took to get to a location. A compass, a sounding lead, which was a line with a weight, so you could determine how far out, and this also helped them determine if they were catching ground fish, how far down they needed to go, and just simple experience from memory, or memory from experience. Well, many of his descendants went into commercial fishing, including Bud. Bud had a very interesting catch when he was a commercial fisherman. He was about 10 miles off of Block Island, and they thought they had this really heavy like mud. They're having a hard time pulling in their net, only to discover as it surfaced, it was not mud, it was a World War II torpedo. What ended up happening is, even though they tried to bring it up gently, it blew up the stern of their boat. Sure enough, multiple boats came out to save him and his crew and pulled him into the point just as the boat started to sink. And this was a Jane Lorraine. Bud actually built this boat himself. Sure enough, he was able to use that boat in the future. He even cut it in half and lengthened it to show again the example of adaptation when needed. But it was the Westcott family, along with many other families, that came to save the Champlains. This community is always looking out for each other, even though they're competing with each other for the best catch at the best price. And then the adaptation of going from a commercial fisherman to the other support industries. You're probably familiar with Champlin's Market and Restaurant, and that was owned by John Champlin, Bud's son. And also, I do highly recommend Carrie's Bloody Mary mix. It's fantastic. I think you might need to try one. Okay. This is a dangerous occupation. The farther they went from the upper ponds and the inner pond, out the breachway, and now they're in bigger and better boats. They're staying out for many more days. The higher risk, the higher rewards, but definitely more danger. This example is a photograph that was taken by Barry Gross of a collision by the Seawolf. And it's just one example of what they handle every day. They're pushing the edge to beat the clock. There is no sense of time, one commercial fisherman noted. He said that when I'm out there, it's all about getting the job done. They'll work while they have that fish and they found that spot, and they just bring it in night and day until the boat is full, and then they come home. Some say that a fisherman wears a watch just so they can tell other people what time it is. They are out all the time, and they might not be on a holiday or vacation schedule. They're based on the weather. And don't forget, they followed the danger and were used for their experience on the ocean because they're able to handle tough situations, even during war. We know that George Washington relied on Rhode Island sailors and fishermen to help cross the Delaware. And we also know that during World War I and II, commercial fishermen were used to protect our coast. They were even supplied special radios, and they were trained in spotting German U-boats, which, yes, did come into our area. So they were protecting our coasts as well as feeding their families. Because of the danger, we do lose many at sea. We see the community supporting each other. Many of you are familiar with the beautiful Fisherman's Memorial, but also there's so much more to how they take care of each other, including scholarship funds and simply just reaching out to each other through support. This is an example from Cheryl Gray Swenson, who's working on a project with the museum that you'll see in May. What will happen is rocks will be painted to commemorate each lost sailor or commercial fisherman from sea, and they will be hidden throughout the town for you to go ahead and return those lost people back to the museum for an artful and memorial celebration of their life. You'll be able to see the whole gallery once the rocks are returned. Point Judith has continued to evolve, and it was once the second largest commercial seaport on the East Coast. We've seen both the ups and downturns as commercial fishermen see them on a daily basis. What the most successful families have realized is a good day today does not guarantee a full catch tomorrow. And then being able to weather the time because they're both smart business people. They're also excellent at fixing their own boats at sea because they're the only ones they can rely on when they're that far off the coast. And they also are just natural hunters, if you could say, looking for the excitement of the next catch. There have been changes in our port, though. We are no longer the largest, second largest to New Bedford. At one point, we were truly the lobster capital of the world, which is not something you think of now. We often think of Maine. Today, we are the squid capital. And it's funny, only 2 generations back, they wouldn't even of eating bait fish. Bob Smith actually shared a story of the first time he tried calamari, which seems like a just interesting way of marketing bait fish. Well, it worked, and it's continuing to support families in our area. If you're my generation, you do think of when going down to the port an interesting odor that was emitted from the dehydration plant, which was used to create food from trash fish, or it was called then trash fish, and it was often used in pet products like food. All the changes continue to welcome people and feed them. I hope after this conversation, you think differently about the food on your plate and even consider buying locally in our fish markets. One thing you can see from the naming of the vessels is the change in philosophy. Right there on the left is the Virginia Maurice. That is still there today. It's the oldest wooden commercial fishing vessel still on the docks as a historic reminder of our past. Many boats were named after family, particularly women, but not always women. There are quite a few boats that were named after sons or fathers. There are even a few boats that were named first, like Suzanne Wescott, who was born after the Suzanne Wescott boat was put in the water. She still takes a ribbing from being named after a boat. What you'll see now is the ships are larger, made of steel, specialized. And I also noticed that their names are more about traits like determination, independence, and courage, instead of after people. Maybe that signals what it takes to be successful in this time. This is not your typical job. We talked about what we weren't going to talk about. We're not going to talk about a job when we talk about commercial fishermen. We're going to talk about a way of life. When you go through and read the transcripts that were conducted in 2021 and 2022 by the Narragansett High School, they interviewed 40 commercial fishermen, and time and again, the word love, passion, excitement was used to describe a way of life. In fact, the South County Museum is looking to open the Oral History Hub, which we refer to as the O Lab, and we'll be meeting up with as many of those commercial fishermen and their shore support to ask them 20 years later how their lives have changed. We'll be documenting those oral histories and preserving them so future generations of researchers can join us. The South County Museum also offers 4-credit internships in coordination with the URI History Department. We've had 2 groups of interns already come through to research multiple topics, including maritime. Ultimately, it seems as though the generations allow for the indoctrination and building the ocean in the blood. The education has shown that it starts at usually 4 or 5 years old with children, not just boys, but girls also, working with their family on a boat, where the modeling is shown that even in the most dangerous situations, being calm, decisive, and clear is the way to survive. Often those who've come into the profession, because it's a low barrier of entry for someone to come into. If you hit it big, there's a great deal of money. But those new entrants often spend the money as quick as they get it, and often don't survive more than a year or so. And it's not just because it's hard work, it's because it takes a certain mentality and passion to be successful. I hope you're curious about the food on your plate and the people who put it there. Their heritage needs to be preserved. In fact, we have a group of over 1.5 thousand commercial fishermen just from Point Judith on our Facebook group, and they've been sharing their stories and their history. The museum encourages the exploration of curious learners to learn about our history, our American history, through the voices of South County residents. What's interesting is we're the ocean state, and yet we don't have a dedicated maritime museum. That's something to consider, but know that since 1933, the South County Museum has been offering this, and we look towards the vast collection that we've created on this topic, as well as life-saving and even surfing, to finally hold a permanent exhibit. Ultimately, come visit. See us online, come in for our exhibit that's opening in May, as well as our upcoming programs. And finally, if you enjoyed this, consider becoming a member to support preserving the past and protecting their future. Finally, if you're looking for any additional information, this will be recorded, and I know that the museum and the library can refer you to resources if you want to learn more. Thank you. I'm going to stop.
Well,
the
thank you,
share.
Beva. Okay. Well, thank you, Beva.